Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're concluding our Guanqiu Jian's Conquest of Korea Let's Talk Lore series with episode 4 titled The Conquest of Korea. Before we get started, here's the answer to our trivia question from the end of our last episode. Now last time, we ended with a brief history of the minor Proto-Korean kingdom of Goguryeo and their past relationship with the Han prior to this war that officially started in 244 when Guanqiu Jian, the Wei prefect of the You province, launched a defensive response against the Goguryeo aggression that culminated in the capture of the Wei fort at Xianping. Marching with an army that numbered just slightly over 10,000 troops, Guanqiu Jian's defensive response soon turned into an offensive counterattack that targeted directly at the Goguryeo capital city of Goguryeo, which was now protected by their newly constructed mountain fortress Wandu Shancheng. And faced with a Wei military response, the Goguryeo king, Wei Gong, or more commonly referred to by his eventual temple name, Dongchuan, mobilized a force totaling 20,000 troops and met Guanqiu Jian's Wei army out on the open field, first at Feiliu Shui, or Feiliu River, where despite being outnumbered almost 2-1, Guanqiu Jian and the Wei forces would utilize compact square formations to overcome the disorganized attack of the Goguryeo forces. Defeated out in the field, the Goguryeo forces fled back east towards the Yalu River and their capital city of Goguryeo. But before they could reach their mountain fortress, they were caught by the pursuing Wei armies at a crossing called Liangkou, where they would fight once again. And here, Guanqiu Jian and the Wei forces would finish the job, as King Wei Gong's forces would be annihilated. Once the battle was over, less than 2,000 of the original 20,000 Goguryeo army remained on the field, as King Wei Gong would take his family and the remaining troops and flee to take refuge in the nearby kingdom of Orkju. Not interested in chasing the remaining Goguryeo forces scattered in the mountains, Guanqiu Jian and the Wei army turned their eyes towards Goguryeo's capital instead. At Wando, Guanqiu Jian noticed that the limited numbers of defenders inside this mountain fortress favored the south and eastern sides of the city, as the west and north side of the city connected into the mountains and were much more difficult to reach. So hoping to exploit this, Guanqiu Jian had the majority of his forces positioned on the southeastern side of the city, as they made a half-hearted assault at the city walls just to keep the defenders' attention on this side, while a select group of elite units secretly approached the mountain on the northwestern side. Using grappling hooks and later pulleys to even bring up their horses, this small group of elite Wei unit eventually got above the Huangdou city wall, utilizing the mountain terrain. From here, they would descend onto the city wall, and once they were inside the city, they mounted their horses and charged throughout the city streets against the surprised and unprepared Goguryeo defenders, causing massive confusion as the main Wei forces on the southeastern side would seize upon this opportunity and overwhelm the defenders to take the city. With the fall of Huangdou and Goguryeo, Guanqiu Jian would raze the city to the ground, massacre all 8,000 inhabitants inside to make a statement against other numerous minor kingdoms in the area, as the Wei army would turn the remains of the Goguryeo capital into a temporary army garrison, as they would spend the winter of 244 right here. Now, the documentation from the records of Three Kingdoms for this campaign is quite brief. As for the Wei side, this was just a minor kingdom rebellion on the frontier. But the Korean records is actually much more detailed, and in my opinion, probably a little exaggerated in favor of King Wei Gong. According to the Korean records, when Guanqiu Jian's army of 10,000 troops first reached the Feiliu River and was met head-on by King Wei Gong's army, the Goguryeo forces would easily defeat the Wei army and kill off 3,000 of the Wei troops. Then, despite getting beat and losing 3,000 troops, somehow the Wei forces would continue to advance deeper into Goguryeo territory and faced off once again with King Wei Gong's forces at the river crossing at Liangkou, where King Wei Gong was once again victorious as he would kill yet another 3,000 Wei troops. Then at this moment, King Weigong became arrogant as he laughed at how weak the Wei army was under the command of Guanqiu Jian, who, according to Korean records, only had 4,000 troops left. So at this moment, King Weigong picked out only 5,000 of his finest cavalry unit, as he felt that would be enough to wipe out the rest of the Wei troops. But because of King Weigong's arrogance combined with the use of square formations by desperate Guanqiu troops who are now fighting for their survival, King Weigong's army would be defeated, as somehow over 18,000 troops would be killed here, with King Weigong escaping with just 1,000 of his remaining cavalry. So, if you compare the two versions, most of the facts, including the starting troop count and the final result, line up. The only difference here is that in the Korean records, King Weigong had two victories over the Wei forces where he killed off a total of 6,000 Wei troops. This, in my opinion, just doesn't make any logical sense. First, in their first encounter, if Guanqiu Jian had lost 30% of his army, wouldn't retreating or waiting for reinforcements be a better option, given that he just started the campaign? Second, assuming Guanqiu Jian somehow did foolishly push on, and then went ahead and lost another 3,000 men, how did the remaining 4,000 Wei troops suddenly fight with the skills needed to defeat not only the 5,000 cavalry units commanded by King Weigong according to the Korean sources, but then somehow find the additional 14,000 troops to kill, all without losing much men on their own side, as even if they lost 0 men, with only 4,000 troops remaining, it is hard to imagine how these 4,000 troops managed to siege, raze, and massacre the Goguryeo capital right after King Weigong's escape. So I believe that the Korean sources here, which is written about 9 centuries later, probably added in these two victories to downplay the degree of defeat suffered here by King Weigong, as the loss of 18,000 troops and the razing of the kingdom capital is definitely not a proud moment in Goguryeo history when the Wei forces only numbered 10,000 strong. This also brings the validity of much of the remaining passages in this part of Korean records into question, as it would also go on to claim that King Weigong returned the following year after having one particular patriotic officer in Niuyou, or Yu Yu as he is called in Korean, who fooled the Wei defenders into thinking that he had come to surrender before giving his life to assassinate the Wei Xuantu commander administrator, Wang Qi, which somehow turned the campaign around. The only problem with this story here is that Wang Qi would actually go on to be reassigned to serve under Deng Ai's army as the administrator of the Tianshui commandery in 263, quite a few years after this, as he would also take part in the conquest of Shuhan, which once again easily disproved the validity of the Korean records here, which goes on to say that King Weigong would be able to eventually repel the Wei invaders and chase them out by the end of 246, which runs completely opposite to the Han records, as well as a rock carving artifact that was constructed by Guanqiu Jian inside the Goguryeo capital city of Wandu, which still exists in fragments today, documenting the events of this period. So for the remaining parts of this episode and series, I'm going to completely ignore the remaining Korean records and just simply relay what happened next in 245 as stated in the records of the Three Kingdoms. After the cold winter month of 245 passed, Guanqiu Jian caught news that King Weigong was trying to re-establish a new capital. So in response to that, the Wei forces divided into 3 groups. The first group will be led by the Xuantu administrator, Wang Qi, who we previously mentioned in the false assassination plot, as he would be assigned to chase and capture King Weigong to the north. The second group, led by Lelang administrator Liu Mao and Daifang administrator Gong Zun, were to march east to fight some of the other minor kingdoms up and down the Korean peninsula on the east coast, as Guanqiu Jian and the third group would stay still at the Goguryeo capital as a reserve force to facilitate both the northern and southern push. On Wangqi's front, the other northern kingdoms in the area soon sided with Wei, as they would provide the supplies for the Wei forces to chase Wei Gong all the way to Zhuling, where the Goguryeo forces made a last stand, only to lose to Wangqi, as King Wei Gong and his family would make a final escape with a few remaining troops as they would run all the way into modern-day Russian territory, where he would eventually die of sickness in the year 248. And with his death, the Goguryeo territories would fall back under direct Wei control, as it would be reabsorbed back into the Xuantu Commandery, much like it was during the Western Han Dynasty. The southern front, led by Liu Mao and Gongzun, also had success as they first defeated the Okju tribes to the east, forcing them to submit once again as subjects to Wei. And on their territory, Wei would re-establish the Lin Tun Commandery, a former Western Han commandery in this area that was lost to local rebellions during the fall of the Western Han Dynasty. Once this commandery was created, the Wei forces sent envoys to the 8 minor kingdoms in the southern end of the peninsula and demanded that they swear allegiance to Wei and become vassals under the jurisdiction of the Lelong Commandery. Unfortunately, due to mistakes in translation and general misunderstanding, the 8 minor kingdoms led by Chen Han tribes thought the Wei kingdom wanted to take their land. So in defense of their territory, they preemptively attacked the Wei forces, only to be soundly defeated. Now, the kingdom of Chen Han, which is often also known as Jin Han in English, is a predecessor to the future Silla kingdom, but at this point, they're still just a loose confederation of tribes, and here they would be defeated as the remaining minor kingdoms would submit to Wei, heralding a period of unprecedented Chinese control over the Korean peninsula, even though it would be a rather short-lived one, given the upheavals of the Jin dynasty transition and the resulting 8 princes affair, and finally, the 5 barbarian invasions. But for the time being, by May of 245, in the span of just roughly 9 months, Guanqiu Jian, through 2 separate military campaigns that started out as a mere defensive response to Goguryeo aggression against Wei, would achieve unparalleled success in the region, as he would personally commemorate this event with a stone carving outlining the details of this campaign and leave it erect in the former Goguryeo capital of Guanqiu. And a fragment of this stone carving, containing over 50 characters, would eventually be found in 1906 and is now on permanent display in a history museum located in Jilin, China. Now, all in all, while Guanqiu Jian's conquest of Korea would be a grand success, it failed to leave a lasting impact, mainly due to the lack of Han population in the area after Sima-Yi's migration policies, and the next few centuries of upheaval within China proper. One impact it did have, however, is that with this achievement, Guanqiu Jian was finally promoted out of the You province, as he would be made the general of the left, and reassigned to become the prefect of the Yu province on the Wei borders with Wu in the south. And with that, our episode here and the series on Guanqiu Jian's conquest of Korea also comes to an end. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting that like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!